Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. How about the Big 12? Big 12, listen, I don't think it has the depth of the SEC. But those top 5 or 6 teams are really good. Kansas City, I think, is a great host for this. And I think some of the schools that are kind of new to the league are going to bring a lot of fans. I think BYU is going to bring a lot of fans. I think also Arizona in their first trip to Kansas City will bring a lot of fans. They used to call the Pac-12 tournament the Arizona Invitational. So this is a fan base that loves to travel for conference championship week. I think it's going to be a really fun environment in Kansas City. Let's go ahead and look at the BetUS Sportsbook odds. By the way, remember, BetUS, you can get a 150% deposit match on your first deposit when you use code YouTube150 at checkout, plus 125% deposit match on your second and third deposits. Those are the BetUS odds. Houston, not surprisingly, 19-1 is the overwhelming favorite in this tournament. Texas Tech, the 2 seed, is number 2 at plus 425. Kind of surprising. Iowa State is actually the 3 seed in this event, but they're plus 600. Arizona plus 750. The BYU Cougars, who outside of Houston are as hot as anybody in this conference, winning 8 straight coming in. BYU is plus 1,200. So what's the big story? I'll be transparent. I don't know that there's like this huge earth-shattering story coming into this tournament. Houston is the regular season champ for a second year in a row. I think it's kind of maybe a little bit understated how dominant Houston was throughout this season. 19-1 in the regular season. I heard this stat. Houston has lost 1 game since the end of November. That is maybe the craziest stat that nobody is talking about. So Houston's dominance is kind of a story, but I think the BYU story is cool. Is it the biggest story coming into the tournament? I don't know. Is it the bubble? The bubble isn't that crazy. You know what the coolest story might be, in my opinion? And by the way, first time for Arizona. So there's some interesting narratives. The one thing that I'm sort of interested in is we could potentially on Thursday get a BYU Iowa State rematch after a week ago when it was the craziest game that maybe we've seen all year. So those are the odds. That's the biggest story. The bubble picture, I'll be real, really pretty quiet in the Big 12, okay? So Baylor is, I would consider them a bubble team. Baylor is, to their credit, to their credit, they needed to win their last 2 games. They get it done. And so to their credit, they are right now, I do think pretty much on the bubble, 17-13 overall. They do have 5 quad 1 wins. Now, what I would say is a couple things. One, cannot take a loss in that opening game. You're going to be playing the winner of Kansas State versus Arizona State. You have to win that game. If you lose that game, I think you could miss the tournament. But even then, on top of it, I think to really feel good, you have to beat Texas Tech. But I think Baylor is probably on the right side right now. I think for Baylor, it's more about avoiding like a truly catastrophic loss than it is accumulating a bunch of good wins. Who doesn't need to accumulate good wins is Cincinnati. Shows you how awful the bubble is, because the truth with Cincinnati, they have no real resume and they are somehow on the fringes of the bubble. And I think that really more than anything shows you how bad the bubble is right now. This is a Cincinnati team that basically played nobody out of conference, nobody worth noting outside of their rival Xavier. And they're entering this tournament right now with a grand total of 1 quad 1 win. Okay, so Cincinnati absolutely has work to do. They play Oklahoma State in the opener of this tournament on Tuesday afternoon. You lose that one, it's portal season. I think they might frankly be looking for another coach if they lose that one. But even if you win, I think you really have to beat Iowa State and maybe BYU to be in the tournament picture, because you just don't have a resume. 1 quad 1 win all season long. You are a team with a bunch of losses overall, no great out of conference resume. And again, 17-14 coming into this tournament. Yeah, I think you probably need to win 3 games to feel good about being back on the bubble. So bubble picture is probably Baylor and Cincinnati. As far as a dark horse, I'll be real. Again, it's tough with Houston on one side of the bracket. If you want to consider BYU at plus 1,200, BYU's playing as good as anybody in this tournament. But I think the interesting thing with BYU is that they got a really tough draw. They play Iowa State in probably their opener. Iowa State was back and forth. That game was insane last week. Iowa State, by the way, I see a comment in the chat. Yes, Iowa State has been dealing with some injuries. That is one advantage that I would give BYU, is that BYU actually will face an Iowa State team. Keyshawn Gilbert, one of their best players, has been out of the lineup. He's returned to practice. Don't know when or if he'll play in this tournament. So BYU, I guess in theory could be, but I just think that Houston team is such a tough matchup for them. And so I'm actually going to go a little bit of a surprise in terms of my surprise team that I think could make a run. I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks. I've been very critical of that team. Kansas fans are mad at me. I said the program's dead after they got destroyed at BYU. But a couple things. One, like Kentucky, they will have a huge home court advantage in this tournament. For people who don't know the geography, I have made the drive from Lawrence, Kansas to Kansas City. It's about a 30-minute drive, easy drive, not a lot of traffic as you can imagine in eastern Kansas, or would it be, I think it'd be eastern Kansas and western Missouri. As you can imagine, not a lot of traffic. So Kansas fans always show out. By the way, the fact that they have the late games probably only helps them in terms of fan support. And the other thing is, listen, they're going to face a team in Arizona. If they were to win their opener, they would face Arizona in the quarterfinals. They just beat Arizona a few days ago. And so you kind of can you see a scenario where they get on a run, maybe beat Arizona? They just played Texas Tech really tough at Fog Allen, even though Texas Tech won. Kansas, to me, is the team that I think in theory I could see hypothetically being a dark horse, being a sleeper, being somebody that could potentially pull off a hypothetical run in this tournament, just like how the bracket breaks for them. And to their credit, they have played better the last couple weeks, the last couple games. Could have, maybe should have beaten Houston on senior night at Houston, and then did take care of Arizona at home at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. In terms of a winner, I'm going to be super boring on this one. I have Houston beating Texas Tech, the 1 seed versus the 2 seed in the championship game. With Houston, listen, I'll be real. I just think there's BYU is playing so well. That's just the worst draw that BYU could have gotten, because BYU, Houston is so physical. I think BYU, you could argue, Houston is the worst team for them to face of anybody in college basketball, with how physical they are, how aggressive they are, just how tough they are defensively, limit what you do. And so I just don't see the scenario Houston beats them, or BYU beats Houston. I think you could actually argue Iowa State's maybe a little bit of a tougher matchup for Houston. Remember, Iowa State, by the way, did beat Houston in the Big 12 tournament last year. And then the bottom half of the bracket, again, Texas Tech is, for people who can't see the bracket, a 2 seed. Arizona is the 3 seed. And the only reason I bring it up is because Texas Tech will face a Baylor team that they're just better than. And then you're either getting a Kansas team playing its 3rd game in 3 days, or you're getting an Arizona team that, again, I know Arizona beat Texas Tech at the McHale Center, but, Texas Tech is kind of playing better. Arizona is not playing as well. I just like the draw for Texas Tech. You get there. I know Texas Tech is the only team that beat Houston in the Big 12. Tough matchup. I will take Houston to win the Big 12 and is your Big 12 tournament champs.